With the South region, where Alabama is the number 1 seed, they're going to take on Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, or Southeast Missouri State. I mean, look, Alabama, I think, looks like the best team in the NCAA tournament right now. It's not to say they're going to win the NCAA tournament because you have to win 6 in a row, but this is the hottest team, I think, coming into the tournament.
Yeah, and they play a style of basketball that allows them to, impose their will against any type of opponent. They really space the floor incredibly well, and they shoot it. They can beat you at the rim now that Brandon Miller is essentially a 6'9" point guard and being able to navigate the lane, get to the rim, and finish. I think the X factor for Alabama continuing to go deep is going to be a guy like Noah Clowney. If he can space the floor and knock down shots effectively, then they're going to be a really, really tough team to beat because they are underrated on the defensive end of the floor. So many times with Alabama, we want to talk about Brandon Miller and their guard play with the experience of guys like Quinterly or Sears. Like, this is a very good defensive unit as well. And if you look at that entire region there in the South, I don't think that there are a ton of dynamic offenses that are going to really push them on that end of the floor, particularly in the top half of the bracket until they'd get to the Elite Eight.
I frankly agree with you. I don't know that Maryland or West Virginia have the firepower.
Yeah.
West Virginia gets talked about as if they are some like defensive juggernaut, like we've seen in the past from West Virginia teams, and they're just like not that. They're more of like an offensively inclined team that is pretty efficient. Like, they have a top 20 offense in the entire country. They were top 4 in the Big 12 in offense. I just don't think they have the firepower to keep up with what Alabama is going to present to them, and I don't think they're going to be able to stop Alabama. The question is, what do they look like against Maryland? I mean, Maryland, I don't know. When you watch Maryland, I feel like they're a little bit of like a nondescript team this year because they don't really have like Willard's guys there yet. You know what I mean? But like, he inherited this roster outside of Jameer Young. Jameer Young's a really good player, really high level scorer, has become a very good decision maker over the course of his career between Maryland and Charlotte. But like, Dante Scott hasn't really taken that next step forward. Akeem Hart and Julian Reese are like an interesting front court. I don't know. Like, it's going to be a good game, but it's not one that I'm like looking forward to on the 8-9 line necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's a good game because it's a little bit more of a contrast of styles in some way. West Virginia leaning in more to offense this year. They will shoot a ton of threes and early clock threes, which is not what you think of when you think of Bob Huggins, but it's kind of who they've evolved into being. Maryland, on the other end, like, Kevin Willard's a fantastic defensive coach, and they can come in and shut teams down a little bit, really play them tough and aggressively. They just go through spurts where they cannot score the basketball. And that has been consistent throughout the season, where they'll be a really good team for 25, 30 minutes of a game. And then they just can't find water from a boat for the other 10. So that's going to be a unique matchup. I agree with you, though. I don't see West Virginia having enough offensive firepower in the way they'd match up with Alabama to be able to pull off that upset there. Like, this is in my opinion, a very secure path to the Sweet 16 for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and then this next 5-12 matchup is going to be San Diego State and Charleston. I see, like, people are talking about Charleston as if this is like going to be a super popular upset pick. Maybe, I guess, but San Diego State is like a killer defensive team that I feel like Charleston is probably going to struggle with. Like, Charleston likes to play up tempo. They like to get up and down the court. And like, I feel like San Diego State's just going to drag them into the mud and like clog it down. And between those guards who are really good, Lamont Butler, Matt Bradley, they're going to be able to dictate the tempo of this game. They're going to be able to slow it down. Basically, elite, like, high level guards that are older players. It's easier to play slow than it is to play fast. I feel like those slow teams tend to be able to dictate games. I see this as a hard matchup for Charleston, don't you?
Totally agree. They love to push tempo. That's one of the 30 fastest teams in the country with the way that Pat Kelsey wants to play there. I just don't think they have a physical answer for a guy like Matt Bradley for San Diego State either. Like, he's like a guard, wing, physical, just mismatched guy, turned himself into a good shooter. Like, that's going to be a tough matchup just on the defensive end of the floor for Charleston. And if San Diego State can control tempo and continue to pound the ball inside a little bit, they're going to have some success.
Yeah, and Charleston likes to fire from three, but this is not a Charleston team that like shoots wildly well from three. They shoot 33% from three. They just take a ton of them. Because of that, though, they tend to open up the court and space the court out. Here's the thing, though, with San Diego State, they have Nathan Mensah, who is just this absolutely terrific 6'10" center, one of the best defensive players in the country. They're going to be able to shut down the paint, I think, at a pretty real level. They're going to throw Lamont Butler on Ryan Larson, who is Charleston's point guard. Yeah. And I think it's going to be really, really hard for Charleston to be able to get any sort of penetration against San Diego State.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be hard for them to actually create threes that way. Now, look, San Diego State goes through like real offensive droughts that could be a real problem for them throughout this game. I just think that they're going to be able to score much easier than Charleston is going to be able to score.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, Charleston, they shoot a lot, but they also get a ton of offensive rebounds. And for me, that's where San Diego State, being as physical, as disciplined, and as experienced as they are, they'll do a good job on the glass and try to limit those second chance points for the Cougars. Not trying to say that this is, a team that can't win a first round matchup, but there's not a lot about what I see in Charleston that leads me to believe that they're a trendy Sweet 16 Cinderella or sleeper pick here. Like I very much like San Diego State. I thought 5 might have been a little bit high of a seed based on the resume that they put together, but no qualms about who they are as a team and their ability to just be very, very solid, particularly on the defensive end.
Yeah, and this next matchup is actually the one that I like from a upset perspective. Yeah. Furman is really good, and Virginia has not played well really for quite a while now. Plus, they lose Ben Vanderplat, who is a really, really important part of their offense from a floor spacing perspective, from a ball movement perspective. I mean, I struggle to see why this isn't the popular upset pick as opposed to the 12-5 Charleston versus San Diego State matchup.
Totally agree with you. And we can talk about Furman in a second here because I love those guys. But without Ben Vanderplat in the lineup there for Virginia, their offense is going to struggle. And I think we saw that in the ACC championship game against Duke. Not necessarily just because Virginia's offense is weak without them. Like, give the Blue Devils credit. They're long, they're athletic, and they defended them very well. But their guards aren't going to be one-on-one separators. That's not the motion offense that they kind of play. And they're kind of inexperienced in the front court besides that. That's something that I worry about a little bit with the Cavaliers moving forward, because as you match up with Furman, this is a small ball, stretch you out kind of team with Jalen Slauson, who is a legitimate NBA draft prospect that can do so many different things on the offensive end of the floor, create from the perimeter as a passer. He's starting to shoot it and pick and pops this year. Really physical driver, loves dribble handoff keepers and can get downhill in a hurry. Like, these freshmen, sophomores, inexperienced bigs for Virginia might have a little bit of trouble just really accounting for Slauson in all the ways he can impact a game.
Yeah, so that's going to have to be a matchup for Jaden Gardner, who is their big 6'6", like 240-pound, mismatch nightmare, power forward kind of guy. And I think Slauson is just way more athletic than he is. The two guys to watch here are Jalen Slauson and Mike Bothwell. I would imagine we see a lot of Reese Beekman on Mike Bothwell, and that's going to be the critical matchup of this game. Whoever gets free between those two players, I think, is going to be able to dictate who is capable of winning this game. They also have JP Pegues against Kie Clark, the longtime 5'9" point guard for Virginia. I think who's finally done after this season, right? This is his last year.
He started there when I was in junior high, so it's probably about time.
Right. So the guy to watch on Furman is Jalen Slauson, just a terrific player, was the SoCon Player of the Year this year. Like Spin said, 6'7", real intelligent, high-level distributor, athlete in the front court, can get up and down the court. I will say, just from like a schematic perspective, I do think this is like a somewhat positive matchup in terms of like X's and O's that Furman is going to run, and in terms of speed of play and in terms of everything. Like, I think Virginia probably isn't like terribly worried about this matchup.
Yeah.
I just think Furman like is just as talented as they are at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fascinating matchup because Virginia's best individual defenders, guys like Clark, Beekman, and Gardner, match up so well just positionally against who Furman puts on the floor. I think we're going to see Virginia go smaller in this game. I think we'll see a lot of Dunn playing at the 5 and front courts with him and Gardner, which the Cavaliers experimented with in the ACC championship game. I will say I have really liked Gardner as an individual defender. A year ago, I thought he did the best job in the country of anybody at guarding Paolo Banchero one-on-one. Just a very
Yeah.
different style of player that Jalen Slauson is. Less isolation, much more quick decision-making, and really ball movement creation for others as opposed to what Banchero does. One quick statistical tidbit here. Furman, the most efficient two-point shooting team in the country. Really good around the basket, even though they play a little bit smaller. How does that go against the Cavaliers' always stout defense, who lead the country in shot clock violations forced? This could be a really low tempo, slow scoring bloodbath of a game, but Furman is talented enough to absolutely win this one. And then I think even go a little bit further because they would match up really well with San Diego State.
Yeah, they would match up really well with San Diego State. Okay, let's go to this next little spot here. I'm going to start reading out betting lines as well. Looks like BetMGM, the sportsbook partner of The Athletic, has betting lines up. West Virginia -1.5 against Maryland. San Diego State -4.5 against Charleston. Virginia -5.5 against Furman. Okay, the next matchup here for us, if we're just going down this list, is Creighton, NC State. The thing that immediately popped to me within this matchup is this has one of the more fun NBA draft-centric matchups of the first round, where we're almost certainly going to get Terquavion Smith being guarded by Trey Alexander, who is a terrific on-ball defender at Creighton. And Terquavion is a guy that has had some real inefficiency issues throughout the course of the season. So when you see this matchup, NC State against Creighton, where it looks like NC State is... I actually don't have a line for that yet. It looks like, let's see if I can just hit. No, it's Creighton -4.5. So I do have a line for that. What stands out about this matchup?
So obviously Terquavion being the juice a little bit for NC State, and him and Jarkel Joyner, a super fun backcourt. They combine for about 34.5 points a game. Really, really dangerous team because they can just get hot from three in a hurry. The way that Joyner and Terquavion create their own shot, you have to guard them from about 30 feet out, and that changes the dynamic of a defense. I think Creighton is capable of doing that because they have Ryan Kalkbrenner on the back line. Trey Alexander can put in as much pressure as he wants on the perimeter for a guy like Terquavion. But at the end of the day, too, like, the Wolfpack can just beat you from three. We saw it in the ACC tournament. If those two guys just get hot and hit isolation jumper after isolation jumper, or get a half step into the lane and try to find a kick, they'll be really, really solid at just knocking down shot after shot after shot. And look, NC State's a little bit undersized. You know, DJ Burns is an energy big man. I'd like to see if he can crash the glass against Kalkbrenner there, but it'll be fascinating to see if Creighton has to force their big man to come out and guard in space at all, or if he can just sit back, protect the basket, and dare the Wolfpack to make enough jump shots to beat them. Think you're muted there, Sam. I think we lost you.
We did. Creighton is the more talented team there.
Yeah. Yes.
I think there's just like no question about that. It's just that Creighton has been weirdly inconsistent at points throughout this year. They had that strange stretch where they lost 6 in a row, and then they win 3 in a row, they lose 2 in a row, then they win like 8 in a row, and then they lose 3 of the next 4. And if we get that Creighton team that is hot, this is a dangerous team. I think a lot of people were excited about Villanova potentially beating them in the Big East tournament. And then they just like had no real issues with Villanova. And then they went out and got the doors blown off of them by Xavier in the Big East semifinals. So like it's impossible to know which Creighton team is going to show up night after night. The thing here is that Greg McDermott is a very good coach if you give him time to prepare. This is a good defense led by Ryan Kalkbrenner. Offensively, I think that they can get enough out of the floor spacing that they're going to derive from Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman, Ryan Nemhard, all of the different guys on that roster. You're going to have Arthur Kaluma hopefully be able to be something of a real mismatch nightmare in that game against NC State, who, if memory serves, I know that like Greg Gant like got hurt in that game against Virginia Tech. And that's like a guy that theoretically could match up against him. It's probably going to end up being even more of Jack Clark against Kaluma. It's hard. This is an all backcourt matchup. And then you have that weird DJ Burns, who's like a big, thick, like 280-pound center in the post against Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is, 7 foot tall and 240 pounds, it looks like, and just very skinny. This is a weird matchup. This is a very fun game. This is going to be one of the most fun games of the first round, in my opinion.
Jack Clark, if I can give you one piece of advice, buddy, stay down on the Arthur Kaluma pump fake. We've talked about it all year. Like, it's the one move that he has. Just don't bite on it. Try to make him a jump shooter. Like, Creighton's offense has always been very balanced. And I do appreciate that about them, particularly when it comes to NCAA tournament time, because it's harder to key in on one guy to try and take away. But this is a Blue Jays team that does not have a ton of depth, where if one of their guards gets in foul trouble, I think that their offense is going to stall out a little bit. And as I'm looking forward, I don't want to presume that Creighton is going to be a lock to beat NC State. Certainly don't believe that to be the case.
No.
I got to wrestle with this one a lot longer. But this is a kind of a pod that's open a little bit in my eyes. Like, I'm not blown away by what Baylor has done right now. And if you're Creighton, you've got to be licking your chops and saying, if we can just get through this first matchup, we've got all of the pieces athletically, experience-wise, to be able to throw at a Baylor team to make a run at the Sweet 16.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that Baylor matchup in the first round, because I actually think that's a tough matchup.
It is.
To figure out as well. Baylor against UC Santa Barbara, that is a Baylor minus 10.5 line. That line feels a bit big to me. Having said that, when Baylor wins games like this, the line can tend to blow out in terms of their winning margin. Here's the thing about UC Santa Barbara. They have an absolutely terrific guard in AJ Mitchell, who is 6'5", who can really pressure the basket. Then they have Andre Kelly, who was an all Pac-12 player last year, who transferred down to UC Santa Barbara, who is like this really strong, big post player. And then next to him, they have Miles Norris, who transferred from Oregon down to UC Santa Barbara, has been a starter there for a few years now. Really good 6'10" spacing 4-man. And then on top of it, you have Josh Pierre-Louis, who is a terrific defensive player, athletic, very strong for his size, 6'4". This is a very talented, very difficult matchup for Baylor. I think this is a danger spot for Baylor. I still think Baylor wins this game, but Baylor has enough like little bouts of inefficiency with Keontae George running the offense to where I do think this is more of a danger spot than what people would think.
Yeah, look, Baylor's lost 4 of their last 6, including back-to-back ones to Iowa State here. They're not coming in incredibly hot into the tournament, but they have experience, championship-level experience, and they have really good guard play. Those are things I tend to fall back on in March as being difference makers, particularly in late games. I love Adam Flagler. LJ Cryer can shoot the lights out. Keontae George is capable of getting hot in stretches like we haven't seen before. But, man, it's hard to trust this Baylor team right now. And I can't really put my finger onto why, but
I can absolutely put my finger on why. They can't defend anybody. Like their defense, according to Ken Palm, in terms of adjusted defensive efficiency, is 104th in the country. They have the second best offense in the country. Right. They just can't stop anybody. And that even includes like Iowa State, who went for God knows how many points per possession against them in back-to-back games, essentially, where they gave up 78 points in 62 possessions against an Iowa State team without Caleb Grill,
right,
who they gave up 1.26 points per possession to a team that is like 95th in offensive efficiency right now. They can't defend anybody. it's a real concern for Baylor. They're trying to outscore teams every single night, and they're just very reliant on 3-point shots. In the Big 12 tournament, they went 14 of 29 from three, Baylor, and they still got absolutely smoked in that game. It felt like, especially in the last 10 minutes.
Yep.
Like you have to try and outscore teams. They just might not be good enough defensively to do it consistently.
Well, and I think that's what it is for me. We know the defense is bad, but offensively, what I couldn't really put my finger on, I'm going to try to right now, is as efficient of a machine as they are, it is very self-creation 3-point reliant. And those teams can go cold in a hurry, particularly in the second game in 3 days. That's what always worries me in the NCAA tournament is, hey, you can get through the first round on Thursday or Friday, but on Saturday or Sunday, when your legs aren't the strongest, when it's a quick scouting report, when other teams can pick up the intensity and pressure with all those marbles on the line, how do you create quick buckets? How do you reliably get stops? I don't think Baylor checks either of those boxes right now enough for me to trust them to go really deep in this bracket.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they probably beat UC Santa Barbara. But if you wanted to pick this as like a stunner upset, I wouldn't hate it. Again, like I don't think Santa Barbara really also has a chance to stop them. Like Santa Barbara's defense is not very good. But this is a dangerous matchup, I think, for Baylor, insofar as I just think almost any matchup for Baylor is a little bit dangerous
Right.
every single time out. Okay. Next matchup in this region, Missouri versus Utah State. This is going to be just an absolute up and down fire fest of offense. Again, much like that last game. How do you feel about Utah State and Missouri?
So I'm going to I was having Missouri penciled in coming into the bracket reveal tonight as a sleeper Elite Eight team. I felt really good about Missouri. They're a unique matchup. They can switch everything at times on defense. Kobe Brown is a stud. They've got experience across the place, and they can shoot the ball really well. I really believe in Dennis Gates. Like, I was all in on Missouri. And then we saw the draw. And Ryan Odom can coach his ass off, and Utah State is one of the most underrated teams in the country. Like, this first matchup really worries me for Missouri. That's a tough 7-10. But if they can get past it, I feel really comfortable with them as an Elite Eight team. Like, that's going to be my put all the eggs in one basket kind of group right now.
Yeah, so Missouri is actually an underdog in this matchup.
Yeah.
Utah State is minus 1.5. And I think that does speak to how dangerous Utah State is. Like you said, Ryan Odom is an absolutely tremendous coach. He's an absolutely tremendous coach. He is the coach that spearheaded the UMBC upset of Virginia in the 16-1 matchup a few years back. It's a team that has a lot of shooting. You're looking at guys like Taylor Funk, who is a 6'9" floor spacer who shot 209 threes this season. Stephen Ashworth, their 6'1" guard who kind of runs the show. He shot 44% from three on 240 attempts this season. Max Shulga, Sean Bairstow. This is just a really, really high level shooting group that does make it hard for opposing defenses, because when you have that kind of shooting, obviously you're able to space the court out. In Missouri, I feel like hasn't really faced a ton of those teams that can really space them out. Missouri's a very bad defensive team as well.
Yeah, yes.
That's the big issue here. Like, Missouri really, really struggles. And it is a bit of a surprise. Like, you know, Kobe Brown, I think, moves pretty well defensively. Demoy Hodge is a really, really good defender at the guard position. It's just that the rest of these guys, they do struggle to move, and they struggle to be able to stick in front of their man consistently. And then they give up a ton of transition points, it feels like, on the other end.
Well, they struggle a lot, when, particularly when I watch them go through these decisions. Are they going to switch everything? Are they not going to switch? I don't think they're the greatest communicating team in knowing when to switch on ball or off ball. And that leads to a lot of either mismatches or at times just complete breakdowns that leave the rim wide open. And Missouri struggles in that regard there. Utah State is going to take advantage of that. They're going to be well prepared. They're going to be game planned for how Missouri wants to defend, and they're going to spread everybody out. Like, this is a uniquely international flavor to the Aggies roster. I really like what Ryan Odom has built there, particularly in a short amount of time. You mentioned Funk coming over in the transfer portal this year. Awesome addition for them. Like, they're a dangerous offensive team that can keep up with Missouri, but also exploit Missouri's lack of defensive attention to detail. I like the Tigers still. Like, I'm gonna ride with them, and it speaks to kind of my belief in Kobe Brown, in Dennis Gates, and looking at the rest of this bottom half of the region. But man, like, this first round matchup really scares me.
Yeah, and the other part of this that I think should make Missouri fans a little bit heartened is that one of the things they really, really struggled with this year was defensive rebounding.
Yeah.
Utah State doesn't really crash the offensive glass like that. Like, this is not a team that's going to like just hammer it and go for it all the time. I will say that they did do it a little bit more late in the season, which could create some problems for Missouri. Dan Aiken, who is their like 6'9", like athletic kind of mover, who was originally at UMBC, then went to Cal Baptist last year, and then finished this season at Utah State. He is a guy that can crash the glass in like a pretty substantial way. They also have this big, like 7'1" kid who I don't remember what's his name. His name's like Doris or something
Trevin
like
Dorius,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, he really, really is just like an enormous dude, and he's the one that Missouri is going to have to get a body on. If they can get a body on him, I think that Missouri can win this game. If Trevin Dorius ends up with 5 offensive rebounds and creates extra possessions, that could end up being 10 extra points for Utah State. And I don't think Missouri can actually allow that to happen. Like, I don't think they have 10 points to work with here in this game.
Yeah, this is going to be one that I scratch my head over for a long period of time, not just because it's a toss-up of a first-round matchup, but because I do believe it's going to have ramifications going deeper into the NCAA tournament, just because, quite frankly, Sam, I don't have a lot of trust in the Arizona Wildcats right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Arizona has been, I think, a little bit better than what you think throughout the latter part of this season. But it was, I think, a little bit frustrating to see them struggle last night with UCLA, given how undermanned UCLA was throughout the course of that game. I think it's just a credit to Mick Cronin and how much Tiger Campbell and Jaime Jaquez are willing to fight, that they made that game really, really tough for Arizona. But I think Arizona shouldn't really have any problems overwhelming Princeton. But I thought that the year they had DeAndre Ayton and they played Buffalo, and Buffalo just like sliced them in like a pretty substantial way. So what are your thoughts here? Because you immediately texted me Princeton. You were like, I'm pretty intrigued by this matchup.
Yeah, I like Princeton a lot just for their style of play. They've got a couple bigger bodies. They rebound the ball incredibly well, which is not something you typically see from a 15-seeded team coming in there. Defend the paint at a high level. I think only allowed teams to shoot about 45% and change from 2-point range. They can stretch you out. They play a true Princeton brand of basketball, but they needed a team that really wasn't going to pound the ball inside on them, because while they have 2 bigger bodies, they're not the biggest in the world. And this Arizona team can have high low after high low after high low, throw the ball inside to Tabellis and Ballo, and just kind of chip away at them really, really slowly. I think this is going to be death by a million layups for the Princeton Tigers. And look, really smart offensive team, experienced group with a lot of upperclassmen. But yeah, I think Arizona's got this one. Just too much firepower on the interior.
And look, like, Princeton isn't the way undersized Ivy League team, right?
No.
They have they have Keyshawn Kellman. They have the kid who won the Ivy League player of the year, the like a boom one.
Tosan, yeah.
Yeah, Tosan's his name. Yeah. And he's like the high post playmaker kind of. And then Kellman's like more of their like big rebounder on the interior. But it just feels like when you have 2 7-footers like that can really crash the glass, can really play. out on the perimeter like that. The thing that Princeton can do really well that can cause problems here is they can force Umar Ballo and Ajolas Tubelis away from the basket. Ajolas Tubelis is probably going to have to be the guy who guards Tucson, right? And I don't love that matchup for Arizona defensively. I think that's actually a real problem for them in this matchup. My guess is that Umar Ballo kind of eats in this game. That's just kind of my theory on what's going to happen here is Umar Ballo is going to be like a real problem on the block for Princeton.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, if you get Tubelis in space, you get Umar Ballo in foul trouble, maybe. You throw Henri Vesar, who is like a freshman in there, who I really love long-term as like a potential high-level player. But you just never know how freshmen react. I think this is like a clear Arizona pick, but maybe like a bit more of a danger spot than the typical 15 is your point. And Arizona is a 14.5-point favorite here, just to continue with all of this.
Yeah. So, not necessarily thinking that Arizona is going to drop this first round matchup there, but Tubelis is the guy that I just don't trust right now. Defensively, I think there's been a lot of lapses that he's had down the stretch run of the season. And, the Pac-12 has not been incredibly strong this year. So I think Arizona had, I don't want to call it a cakewalk, so to speak, but they weren't tested in the way that they will be beyond the first round of this NCAA tournament in a long period of time. So Tubelis has to be able to move his feet laterally, particularly if they're going to play him alongside Ballo. There are going to be so many teams that can space them out on the offensive end. Just look at the rest of this bracket here, Sam. I mean, Missouri is going to be able to do it because they like to play a little bit smaller. Utah State is going to be able to do it. So either team that they'd face in the round of 32 could give Arizona some trouble. Creighton, a really good offensive group because they play 4 around 1. NC State really shoots the crap out of the basketball and plays smaller. And then Baylor, as we talked about, number 2 offense in the country with a ton of guards who can really light it up. I don't know where Tubelis hides past this first round matchup. And the Wildcats are really going to go as far as his defensive attitude and effort is going to take them.
Okay. Let's just do very quick picks here in this region. So you're going to take Alabama to beat the 16 seed, right?
I am, yes.
Okay. Maryland against West Virginia.
He a Terp. I'm going Terps.
I think I'm also going to go Maryland in that game. San Diego State or Charleston?
I'm going with the Aztecs.
Agree. Virginia Furman?
I'll take the Paladins here.
Agree. Creighton or NC State?
Oh, tough one. I'm going to go Creighton.
Agree. Baylor or UC Santa Barbara?
Another tough one, but I'm going to give it to Baylor here.
I'm also going to give it to Baylor. Missouri or Utah State?
Oh, Sam. I'm just going to do Missouri. I'm going to do it.
Okay, I disagree. I'm going to say Utah State. Arizona or Princeton?
Arizona by 8.
Okay, Alabama or Maryland?
Roll Tide.
San Diego State or Furman?
I'll go Furman.
Okay, I disagree. I would take San Diego State there. Creighton or Baylor?
I will go Creighton here.
I think I agree with you on that. Okay, and then Arizona or Missouri for you?
I'm going Missouri. I would take Utah State here if they win the 7-10 matchup. I would take NC State over Baylor if they win the 6-11 matchup. So that's why I feel much more comfortable kind of ironing these in on my own bracket.
Okay. I think I am still going to go. Oh, man. That's actually Utah State against Arizona is a bit harder than what I would think.
It's a tough one.
I think I am going to go Utah State there. Okay. I really like that Arizona team, though. Yeah, I'm going to go Utah State. Okay. Alabama or Furman for you?
Yeah, I'll go Bama.
Yeah, Alabama for me as well over San Diego State. For you, it would be Creighton against Missouri.
Yeah, another tough one here, but I think I'll go Missouri.
And I think I picked Creighton over Baylor. I think I would also take Creighton over Utah State in my case, and then Alabama against
Yeah,
Missouri for you?
Yeah, Bama. Yeah, going Bama.
Okay, and I would also take Alabama to the Final Four.